iPads are useful for their purpose, but they are no substitute for brains.
All right, here we go.
I have to say, well done, Ray. Well done. Well played, my adversary. Well played.
Phoenix isn't gay, but if he was, he'd pick Fremont.
Oh yeah, he'd be living down there with you in the bunker, man. Woo!
Once you go free, you always do the Z.
Like one day I'm not going to Duncan, and you could get a controller, a new Xbox, possibly even a cord.
Technical difficulties have occurred with the hosts of this podcast. Please do not adjust your broadband connection. Thank you.
Welcome to BGFG episode 458. I'm your host, Chris Phoenix, and unfortunately, Fremo Z is not here this week because, of course, we had some technical difficulties, audio problems, and the original one didn't record, so I had to come back and do everything kind of over again. And, well, we're just going to try to get through it and get to this week's news so we can write the next week's show and get that done properly. But this show had some good points that I wanted to bring up and talk about. And I just, unfortunately, Fremo is not here. So let's get into this week's news.
BGFG News. You heard it here third.
So first up in this week's news, TikTok. TikTok got hit again. This time the DOJ is suing TikTok and its parent company ByteDance for failing to protect children's privacy on their social media platform. They're saying that even though they're supposed to get parental consent to share information about users under 13, they're not getting that permission. This again is because ByteDance is a Chinese company, and there is fear that too much information about U.S. citizens is being shared with the Chinese Communist government. Furthering the TikTok argument is that TikTok allowed users that were under 13. What the hell? There's no parental supervision here whatsoever. Children under 13 on social media is wrong, in my opinion. It's just wrong. I never allowed my kids on social media when they were under 13, especially under 13, because there's some stuff on the internet that you just cannot unsee, and parents need to be aware of that. And I get parents at my job all the time that ask me, how do I protect my kids? Don't put them in front of the computer. Well, they have to then sit with them and monitor what they're doing, because when a kid is researching stuff for, say, homework, they're going to be all over the place, right? They're going to be on all different websites. They're going to be doing all sorts of research, and they're going to be clicking on links. And guess what? Some of those links are not going to be valid. That's just the way it is. And as for social media, why? Why do they need to be on social media? Let them go outside and communicate with their friends and stuff. There's no reason for them to be on social media. It's bad enough that the middle schools are vicious anyway, let alone having a under 13 on there. And what does that say about us as a society, too? That we're talking about kids under 13 creating social media accounts for themselves. That's just, I don't understand how this has become a thing now. And I've seen the kids sitting there making TikTok videos and all sorts of other things and selfies and video chatting, and I've seen it where they're just constantly on video, even if they have their phone on the desk, the video's still going. I don't understand it, and that can be a generational thing, but having the kids on social media is wrong, in my opinion, no matter how you cut it. I just don't agree with it at all. I think I don't want to say it's time for somebody to do something about it. I just think it's time for these social media networks to take some responsibility for it. Stricter. Look, if Pornhub can stop an entire state from connecting to theirs, I think that social media outlets can actually figure out how to keep underage kids off of their services. And I get it. We need to protect ourselves from certain parts of the Chinese government as well. Look at the example of the hacking group called Storm Bamboo. They happen to breach an undisclosed ISP from within. So an ISP is an internet service provider. So imagine it like Cox Cable, Comcast, Verizon. These are ISPs, and they didn't disclose what ISP it was, but the company hacked from inside, and by using the updated software mechanism, that doesn't violate security digital signatures, they were able to poison software updates and modify the DNS requests. So DNS stands for domain name server. This is when you type in google.com and it goes to 8.8.8.8. So everybody has an address, 192.168.0.1. Everything has an address. The domain name server changes it to a proper name, sony.com, walmart.com, bestbuy.com, target.com. It changes it to then. But what they did was they modified the DNS request going to the website and then dropped a payload of malware on them. It's basically called a browser redirect or a browser hijack. Usually it's a Chrome extension called reload text, and that is stealing your browser data. So that browser data can be a lot of different things. The sites you've gone to, which then a hacker can go to that website and see if they see something with your name on it and try to compromise it. And it's just one of those things that's just tough because it's another country and we're having a cyber war right now with said country. And it's tough to wrap your head around sometimes. But that's what a browser hijack is, and that's how they get it done. And there's so many different ways that it could be perpetrated that you can circumvent a company. But the fact that an entire ISP was compromised from within without anybody knowing, that's an actual issue. And people like that in China, that hacker group, need to be held accountable, whether they're behind the wall of China or not. And if you've ever been compromised, then you know what a gut punch that can be. Absolutely. But justice should be swift. And I say that because not so much when you attack our country directly, I guess. So this is something that's probably going to get me some hate mail, and I'm sorry if it does. But I just found this article, and it was about the September 11th, 2001 attack on the Twin Towers, 9/11. That was in 2001, 23 years ago, okay? Now, the DOD just released a statement that the three men accused of plotting the attack have now entered into the pre-trial agreement. Pre-trial. They've been in Guantanamo Bay for 23 years. And believe it or not, survivor families are upset that these three men reached a plea deal. But again, I want to say, 23 years they were in there. And the deal is so that the Department of Justice can find out more about their orders and where their orders came from. So here's my issues with all this. First, we had men awaiting trial for 23 years. Years. Guilty or innocent. What does that say about our country and our judicial system? Secondly, I got this from a BBC article, not even an article from a paper in our country. Okay? 23 years they've been in there. We're supposed to be representation of freedom and democracy and things like that. And I get it. 9/11 was no joke. I get that. And even if it was, and when we first recorded this, Fremo made the comment of that, they should have been executed for what they did. I do not disagree with that. Well, let me say that's for another debate entirely. But the fact of the matter is, it should have been like 2 or 3 years. And justice would have been served one way or another. The families of the victims could have had some closure. But instead, we held them in Guantanamo Bay for 23 years. What possible intel are you going to get from them after 23 years? You're not going to get any intel. The entire landscape has changed in that part of the world. So what exactly were you doing? 23 years is a long time. Either sentence them or do not sentence them. I think that was just a little bit mean. And the fact that nobody in this country is even talking about it is amazing to me. All right, finally, on a lighter note, out of the news this week, YouTuber files a class action lawsuit against who, you might ask? OpenAI, for scraping the creator's transcripts. This guy's name was Dave Millett, whom I can't even find squat about this guy. He's from Massachusetts, the next state over, and I can't find anything about him or their YouTube channel. Everyone that I found was basically, this guy poking people for clickbait, literally, in my opinion. If that's even him, it might not even be him. It might be some other guy with the same name. I don't know. And he claims that his work and others have been used by ChatGPT and OpenAI to glean information and use it for profit. This goes right back to the fact that they are scraping public data. Like, I don't get it. It's public. And this is what we talked about on the show a few weeks back. Public data is public data. If you're scraping the public landscape, then it's public. It's out there. It's there. Deal with it. The fact that somebody's making money off it, come on. Everybody's making money off of it. I use a news aggregator that's technically making money off the news headlines from a bunch of different sites that I pick. So how is this any different? How? They're just scraping the public data. And honestly, the joke's on them, because if they're scraping our data on our show, there's nothing like old and possibly wrong information, isn't there? Put that in your machine and smoke it and grind it. All right, let's get into this week's music. And we're winding down the summer of covers, thankfully, because I'm having trouble finding quality ones anymore. But to wrap it all up this year, there's a couple more left, and there are a couple of really good ones. And this one is one from one of my top 5 bands of all time, the Stone Temple Pilots. And this is them covering one of my other top bands, Led Zeppelin, covering their song Dancing Days. I want to catch you on the other side for some stick style, and then I'm going to talk about something else that I found pretty interesting this week. So let's get into Stone Temple Pilots, Dancing Days. We'll catch you on the other side. Before we do that, I am drinking solo, but I am still drinking my Modelo, because I do love me some Modelo. Good stuff. So cheers to all the listeners. Just a great, great summer beer. All right, let's get into this week's stick style.
Gaming.
First up in this week's stick style news, Bungie's in some hot water. So Bungie, man, you had Halo. You had Halo. Even if you thought it ran its course, there's still other things you could do with it. But you sold it to Microsoft for some ungodly reason. And then you did Destiny. Destiny 1, really good. Destiny 2 was okay at the beginning, then you dropped the ball again. Now it's just like you could tell that the developers, we talked about on the show before, you could tell the developers, even 2 of my kids that play it regularly said the same thing. Like, they're just finishing it up. Like, they're not even caring. It's just like, hey, here's the last one. Like when their last chapter was announced or about to be dropped, it leaked, and they didn't even care. They were like, whatever, it leaked, big deal. So the Bungie CEO, Pete Parsons, announced that 220 people will be laid off. That's 17% of their workforce. And Pete said that this is because of financial challenges, the rising cost of development and industry shifts and economic conditions. Okay, I get it. Now, thankfully, some of those positions are going to be absorbed by Sony Interactive, the parent company. But again, it's Sony Interactive. You haven't exactly broken the mold with anything lately, buddy. So I hope that these guys can add something to it that, maybe Sony can make a comeback or something. But Bungie has already announced that there's not going to be any more Destiny DLC. And their spin-off game from Destiny was also canceled. And just like any of the corporation, one day you're told you're valued, and then the next day you're gone. And that is the common thread in today's corporate structure. But the bigger story here is that Pete Parsons has spent $2.4 million on classic cars and trucks. And the kicker is that he spent over $500,000 since the October layoffs just on cars. It just ain't right. And another sad news this week in gaming, GameStop has shut down Game Informer magazine. Game Informer magazine was a mainstay in my home. I mean, we definitely had that. We would go through, we traded around with each other, and it was just good. It was a really good gaming publication. It began publishing in 1991, and as the companies do nowadays, they pulled the entire staff. And this is the thing that shocked me. It wasn't like a slow burn or anything else. I mean, yeah, they stopped doing kind of like the paper magazines and went to digital recently. but they pulled the magazine, the website, the podcast, and online videos. So just let that sink in for a second. The magazine, okay, it's a magazine, digital or otherwise, it's a magazine. Their website, their whole website, all of the podcasts that were affiliated with them, and their online videos. Now, the website and online videos alone were single-handedly very important because these were where you got good tips. These are where you got ratings. There's a lot of stuff connected to it, and they're all gone. Even links that we had for this show are now dead as a doornail. You can't, there's nothing, there's no redirect, there's nothing. And I think that was wrong. You could have left the website and the online videos and just not worried about it. You could at least leave them there for a couple of years at the very least. And then a Teams call. So, of course, every corporation does the Teams call. I did one when I worked for an IT contracting company. And basically, I get the same thing as the guys over at Bungie. GameStop, rather. Well, I guess Bungie, too. You're all laid off. You'll begin receiving your severance packages shortly. Be out by the end of the week. That's a little brash. And, like I said before, all their URLs are dead. So, even if you worked for them in that division, in the online magazine edition, then you literally have nothing to show for it because you can't direct anybody to a URL because they've all been killed. So it's really distressing and sad to see. And I also noticed something interesting the other day. Remember the Deadpool game that came out years ago? I mean, everybody's talking about Deadpool and Wolverine. Top of the box office, made most R-rated movie ever made, money-wise. But remember the Deadpool game that came out years ago? Like a while ago. There was a Deadpool game. And I searched for it because I was curious. And it was just the link that popped up. The old video game is being sold on eBay for way more money than it's worth. And at the time that I put the show together, Kotaku posted the story that there were several listings of the game all around $300. So I get it. Try to get your money. The game's been delisted. It's hard to get. You can't find it anywhere. And you can sell it for like $300. The funny part was that it was for PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, Xbox One, and the most popular being the PlayStation 4 version. So 2 of those you can still play, Xbox One and PlayStation 4. But if you have the other 2 versions and you're trying to sell them for $300, that's not going to fly because they're not going to play in anything unless you have an older console that's ready to go. And as of this day, I looked them up again, and all the prices have come down to a more reasonable $70, except for one. And that one is by Randy Rascal 11981. He currently has 34 bids with 6 days left for the PlayStation 4 version of the game, new in the box, still wrapped, for $3,050. Kudos to you, Randy, because somebody's going to be on the hook for $3,000 for that game. And I hope he gets his money, because that's awesome. Just great. And I did also find my version of the game. So I have a dog in this hunt. And before anybody else thinks about it, this is the Xbox 360 version. This is the game in the case. And I dug out my Xbox R2D2 360. I had to order a new power supply, but I did get it. I haven't even fired it up yet. But it does operate. Last time I turned it on, it was working. And so I'm going to throw Deadpool in there in the next day or so, and we're going to play it on stick style live and see what that. I vaguely remember even playing it. It was so long ago. But before we go, I'm going to take a quick take. Stick style on X, formerly Twitter. I reposted a video of Arrowhead's Joel, and we talk about Joel a lot kidding around and Helldivers, but Arrowhead, their game master is called Joel. So the video that I found and was all over the internet, and then I reposted it on Stick Style. It was looking like those stock videos of hackers sitting at a desk. But what the interesting part of this is that as they go into the room, Joel is an acronym. And from what I've gathered, Joel is not just one person. It's mostly one person, but it's actually like a team of like 2. 2 or 3. And they control the entire gaming system of Helldivers. And I think it's great that it's now been released that it's an acronym, so I'd love to find out what that acronym means. Going to be interesting. Finally this week, THQ Nordic. THQ Nordic has always been one of those game companies that have been close to our hearts. And they had some announcements this week, some better than others. So let's run them down real quick. First was The Eternal Life of Goldman. It's a 2D game. Looks pretty fun. Disney's Epic Mickey Rebrushed is out in September. Titan Quest 2, which is an ARPG. They announced that. Gothic 1 remake. Didn't even know there was a Gothic 1. That's a crafting and role-playing game. Way of the Hunter. Hunting virtually. Wonder how Peter's going to feel about that. But I think it's kind of corny. A hunting game virtually. If you feel like you're compelled to hunt, go out and hunt. Freebo's here, he'd tell you that he used to go out and hunt, and he would get deer, quelling the population so it doesn't get overrun. And that deer would feed his family for the entire winter. Legit. But again, you could get Way of the Hunter. New Darksiders, of course, was announced and teased. But one that we here at Stick Style are most excited about, without a shadow of a doubt, is Wreckfest 2. Looks great, and it's Wreckfest. That should be out in the fall. If you have not played Wreckfest, if you have Game Pass, it's on Game Pass on Xbox. If you don't have Game Pass, you can get it on Steam. If you have not played Wreckfest, it's a truly pleasurable game. It's racing, of course, or demolition derby, or banger races they call them. It's got really good physics for the cars. You can end up driving around in a car in 3 wheels. It's just a great game. Download it. I think if you like any sort of racing game or car game, you're going to have fun with it. It's really fun. It's super easy to drift, and it's one of those things you kind of have to do most of the time. But the fun of banging around and getting to accidents and hitting people and flipping them out, it's just a lot of fun. Wreckfest 2 will be out in the fall, and looking forward to it. All right, let's get into our last segment, which is For What It's Worth this week. So because Fremo's not here, I'm going to fill in what Fremo said. I'm also going to fill in what my kids said and also people that I work with. There's this big question right now in security at Airbnbs. An Airbnb is basically if you have a big house and you're not going to, your kids are all grown up and you want to make some extra income, you can rent out your house if you're going to go spend time in another state or something. You can rent out your house and make a little bit of cash, a little skiddo. One guy in Maine admitted to recording and taking photographs of some of the people that were staying at his Airbnb. Now, the first argument that comes up is goes, no, that's disgusting. And then the counter argument quickly was, it's your house. I have 7 cameras in my house because I have kids and I get tired of hearing I didn't do it. But there's 7 cameras in my house, nothing in the bathrooms or bedrooms, but there's 7 cameras in the common areas of my home. And the argument is what to do with the security of your home. So Fremo pointed out that you've opened up your door to have people come in and stay in your home. That was on you. You did that. So if they throw a party, and there has been times where people have thrown parties and kind of wrecked Airbnbs, and the Airbnb company becomes liable for it because that's the agreement that you make. But I don't know, because this guy didn't just do cameras. He did hidden cameras in like teddy bears, clocks, things like that. And he did them in bedrooms and stuff. That's wrong. That is wrong. Now, I don't like the idea of somebody else having sex in my bed. That's kind of gross. But again, you are renting out your house. This is on you. You're doing this. Hidden cameras, that is wrong. And it was really a 50-50 split with all the people I asked and all the people I know. The Airbnb terms state that it's on you, the renter, to kind of deal with all that stuff. But again, if I put in the renter's agreement and disclose that these cameras are on and I will be watching to make sure that my house is safe, you're paying for a place to sleep and stay. Now, on the flip side, people are saying, well, I'm paying for a place to stay. So it's like I'm renting this house for now. I shouldn't have to worry about somebody watching me. I don't disagree with that argument. But again, it's my house. I want to know if you rent something. I live in an area where in the 4th of July, it's the oldest parade in the country, and everybody comes here. So many people from other states and other parts of the country. So the idea of me renting out my home, especially if it's going to be like 20-somethings. Oh, they're going to meet a bunch of people. Hey, come on back to my place. I'm on an Airbnb. We'll have some drinks. What happens if that gets out of hand? What happens if more people come than they expected? There's stuff in my house that I'm going to possibly get stolen, broken, things like that. That's the concern I have as a homeowner, right? But the Fremo brought up a good point. I did agree to rent the house. And with that comes some risks. And you have to kind of state that you have those risks. You know, I would assume that the final answer to all of this would really be creating that contract, that airtight contract that states what you will and will not allow, that the cameras will be on if you do have cameras in the common area. This is for sleeping and, no parties, things like that. That is something you can absolutely put out there and on the contract and have them sign. If you disclose that and they still don't want to rent, then they don't want to rent. But if they do want to rent, they have to adhere to those rules, in my opinion. But let me know what you think. You can drop us an email, or you can click on the top of the podcast link to send us a quick little message in our podcast distributor. So, so tell me what you think about the Airbnb situation, or anything for that matter, on the show. So we'll be back in just a few days to record the next episode, and Fremo will be here. So that's it for this week. 10's down, show's over.
So you can find more of this garbage at bgfgonline.com. You can also send us an email with your questions or suggestions at bgfgshow@gmail.com. Find our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Overcast, Podcast, Castro, Castbox, Podchaser, and YouTube. Thank you for listening.